Hello, this is Mary Jo Webster. We've got more on data cleaning and spreadsheets. This one is going to cover some other string functions, functions for working with strings or text. These specific ones, left, mid, right, and a few others that work with those functions, are generally used for splitting apart things. So here we go. It's not uncommon that you might get data where things are all jammed together in a way that they shouldn't be. For example, these are dates, but there's no dashes or slashes or anything in there to distinguish the month, day, and year apart from each other. And so you might want to pull them apart. So what we're going to do and make it into a new date as well. So we're going to use a little date function in here as well. But this could also be there's other things you might want to do in splitting, and we're going to go through some other examples as well. So this one is very simple explanation of how the left, mid, and right functions work. They work on what is known as based on bytes. You have to tell it where to start and how far to go. And so each value in a cell is known as a byte. A space could be a byte. So, for example, let's look at this first value in A7. 2014, that's the year, takes up the first 4 bytes of the cell, starting on the left, 4 bytes. And then the O2, or February, takes up bytes 5 and 6. And the 28, the day of the month, takes up 7 and 8. And so if we want to pull out the year, we need a way to tell it, take those first 4 bytes. And this will work because they're all the same. There's a pattern here that they're always, the year is always in the first 4 bytes, the month is always in 5 and 6, and the year, or the month is always in 7 and 8. Or the other way you could think about it is the rightmost 2 bytes are always the day. So we'll break this apart, and then we're going to use a different example to show how you could deal with situations when these don't line up so neatly and perfectly in terms of bytes. So if we want the first 4 bytes, the easiest thing to do is to use the left function, because the left function is already set that you're going to start on the left, and you're going to start at byte 1. So what you have to do is tell it which cell to do its work on, in this case A7, and then you do a comma, and it needs a second argument. That second argument is how many bytes to take. So this is not, go to byte 4. It means literally take 4 bytes. Almost think about it, bytes of an apple, right? And so it's going to take the first 4. So if we just put the number 4 in there, close the parentheses, you can see it's kind of giving us a little example that it is going to pull 2014. There you go. And it's pulling, notice it's flush left. That means it is pulling it as text. It is not pulling it as a number. There we go. But now we have that year. So that's the left function. Let's do the day function next, just for simplicity's sake. So the day is on the other side of our cell, right? It's on the right. So we can do the same thing that we kind of did for left, and we could say right, A7, and take 2 bytes. Now this time it's saying start on the right of the cell and take 2 bytes. So it should grab the 28. And there it does. It grabs the rightmost 2 bytes in the cell. Now the month is a little harder, because we can't say start on the left, we can't say start on the right, but we can use the mid function that just requires an extra argument. So the mid function, we have to tell it, like we did the others, we have to tell it what cell to do its work in, A7. But then we need to tell it where to start and how many bytes to take. So 2 arguments. So where to start is going to be byte 5. And how many bytes to take is going to be 2, because we're having it take 2 bytes. So this might be a little hard to wrap your brain around, that the 5 means which position in our byte string. Byte number 5 is where we start, and then from there we just take 2 bytes. And so it'll take position 5 and it'll take position 6. There we go. And it's preserving it as text, you can see with the leading 0. So now that we have those pulled out, now it's if you know that since this is a date and we want it stored as an actual date that Sheets recognizes as a true date, now we can use the date function where we just need to tell it the month, the day, and the year. And it's not getting that right. So it wants year, month, day, I think. It's going to tell you here in a minute. Year, month. Whoops, I don't want to. Or did I type in wrong? C7, D7. There we go. Month. So it wants it in the order of year, and then the month. Nope. Year, month, day. So do you see how I troubleshooted that? It's important to know. You can just, see what it's doing here. There's a little cheater thing. You can see what it's doing. You can also look up that function and see what it requires, and it should tell you what order those things need to go in. If you put them in the wrong order, so I'll flip this around. If I did D7 and then C7, we'd get the wrong date. It's totally seeing something different, right? Okay, so there's some basic functions. Let's go to the sheet called split 2. So this is a situation where I want to split the city and state up. So the opposite of what we did in the last video, we want to tear this apart. So we have the city and the state in separate places. Now we can't use, well, left seems very appealing, right? Because the name of the city starts on the left. However, the way we use left in the last example, it requires you to say how many bytes to take. And for Shakopee, that's going to be, well, it'll end up being the same number of bytes as Prior Lake, but it'll be fewer bytes for Chaska. So each city is a little different in how many bytes to take. So then you need to see, is there something consistent, a consistent pattern that it would allow me to tell it where to break? In this case, there is a comma, and it will work for that. Now, a lot of people might say, well, I could just, what if you had Chaska space Minnesota? I could tell it to split on the break, on the space, right? Well, that's not going to work for Elk River, because what will happen is it'll break on the first space, and you'll end up with the word elk instead of Elk River. So you have to have a pattern for how to do this. So having a comma works great. But what we can do is we need to tell it to find that comma, and we can tell it to find where in there the comma is, which byte it's located at. So that is what this search function does. So let me just show you an example of what search is going to do. So if we say search and we say we want to find a comma in A8, what it's going to do is tell us, I'll just pull a few of them down. It's going to tell us that on Shakopee, the comma is located at byte number 9. And in Prior Lake, it's located at number 11. That's interesting. And then Chaska is 7, and then Elk River is 10. So remember when we did the left function, we just told it what byte, how many bytes to take. So let's go in city, and we can say left A8, comma. Now instead of putting in an exact value like we did in the previous example, we put in the number 5 or number 4. We can say search, look for a comma in A8, and that represents where to stop. But I'm not going to do the autofill. The thing that's wrong here is that it did include the comma, because we told it to go, the search said to go to byte 9. And that means it will include byte 9. But we don't want it to include byte 9. So the little trick you do is here at the end, between these last two parentheses, you put -1. And so what that means is it'll go to byte 9 and then it'll step back one spot. And then we have the correct cities here. Okay. So that looks good, right? So we used the search to figure out the number of bytes that we needed. Now, so we could do the same thing with the state. Now, of course, these are all Minnesota, but imagine they're not all Minnesota, and they're all different. So we could use the same thing with the mid function here. So we could say mid A8. Now we need to tell it where to start. So we need to tell it to go find the comma again. So we do that search again, just like we did previously. Now this time, that search is going to take it to the comma, which remember on Shakopee was at position 9. And then there's a space, which is position 10. So we could say +2, or we could add a trim function to this to fix that leading space. So let's do that. We're going to do a +1, so we're going to tell it to go ahead. Now remember, mid needs another argument. So we gave it the A8, which cell to work on, and then we did the search to tell it to go find that comma and what byte the comma's at, and then go ahead one space. And then it needs to know how much to take. So it should be 3, because there'll be a space plus M and N. But you want to be liberal here. So technically, you can just tell it 100 or anything big, which essentially means take the rest of the cell, whatever is there. If you know exactly what that's going to be, you could put that in. But I just usually just throw 100 in or something really big to make it go the rest of the way. Now, it's going to have that leading space on there. So you can see it here. So we'll go back in our formula and wrap the whole thing, with trim. So you put trim in front and open parentheses, and then another closed parentheses at the very end, and then it won't have that leading space anymore. And we've got our state name in a separate field. Okay, one more. So we just did this same data, right? We just split it on that comma. There is also a thing in here called text to columns that will, if you have this nice consistency with like a column, with a comma or some other delimiter of some sort, you can push a little button to make this happen. And I know you're probably going crazy now thinking that. But what I usually do is make a copy of my original column because I want to preserve. So I've got my original column and then my new column. And I don't want text to columns repeated in there. I'm going to insert a row above so I have a space here. So those are my labels. So you highlight your new column and go to the data menu, and there's this function here called split text to columns. Boom. It has already guessed that you want a comma, and it will find that delimiter if you need it. If you're doing this in Excel, it will ask you what the delimiter is and will give you a little more work. So do you see how it actually got rid of my new column? It split it into, that's why I had to make a separate column. Okay, all done with strings.